Hi everyone, welcome back to my F1 diaries. Sorry for the lower quality today. My computer is dead, so I'm using my mom's laptop that cannot recognize my webcam, nor can it run After Effects. So we're gonna have to do with this. It's not too bad actually, it's not too bad, I think. Anyways, F1 is finally back after a few weeks of break, which wasn't even the actual summer break. That will come up after next race, but we'll get to it. Right now we can start with something that happened during the break, and that is of course Christian Horner getting fired from Red Bull. Honestly, good riddance. I never liked him or Red Bull, and I think this should have happened last year when those allegations were coming up against him. I know there were some internal investigations and that he denied everything, but I do believe women, and there is this alleged Google Drive folder with alleged photos of everything, and the woman who made those allegations is taking this to actual court. So I do believe there is something there, but even if there isn't, he should have been at least suspended from team principal when those allegations came up until everything was cleared. So I don't like the precedent that sets for any other sexual harassment or sexual assault cases in the F1 paddock. And also, as Jos Verstappen said, it tore the team up. A bunch of people left Red Bull, most notably Adrian Newey, but also people like Jonathan Whitley, a bunch of people from strategy that moved to McLaren, and many more. So for once in my life, I agree with Jos Verstappen, and Christian staying in that team after that controversy ruined them from the inside. So although he wasn't fired for that, I'm so glad he was fired, but we haven't actually given a clear reason why he was. Obviously, there's been the decline in Red Bull's performance in the last 2 years, but it's really hard to believe that it is the sole reason. There's been a lot of talk about it being related to Max, whether as a condition to keep Max in the team, or that Max have already signed with Mercedes and Christian is fired for not being able to keep him, which I think is less likely. I think everything's staying where it is, and Max stays at Red Bull, George and Kimi staying in Mercedes. And I know there's also been like a power shift inside of Red Bull, like with the shareholders, something there changed. So Christian lost some of his backing, like up the order. So all of that led to him being fired. And as I said, good riddance. He won't be missed, at least for me. I mean, I don't know. And maybe some of you like Christian Horner for some reason. The person who's stepping up instead of him is Lauren McKee, which I'm totally butchering his name, but he was the team principal in RB up until now. And I actually really like him. Already you can see a change in the morale of the team. Everything seems a lot more fun there. And I hope this means good for Yuki, because he had a really great relationship with him. So maybe Lauren being the team principal now will mean Yuki has a seat for next year. I'm in. So that is what happened during the break. At least we had something to talk about during those 3 long weeks. And honestly, the whole time I was really anticipating the Max news, like to see if he stays at Red Bull or moves to Mercedes, which never came, which leads me to think that he's staying at Red Bull again. All the signs lead to the fact that he's staying. So that whole thing made the break a lot less boring than it would have if we just had the break. And this weekend, finally, we had another race. Not just a race, also a sprint, because this was a sprint weekend at Spa, which a weird spot for a sprint. The new sprint schedule for next year also dropped, which is pretty controversial in my opinion. Wait, let me get this up. So it's China, Miami, Canada, Silverstone, Zandvoort, and Singapore. What a weird choice of tracks, in my opinion. Singapore is crazy. Like, Singapore is the most crazy of them all, because that race is tough enough. Why would you make it that 2 races there? I'm not loving this sprint schedule. I don't think a lot of F1 fans like it either. Anyways, Spa is a sprint weekend, as I said. And this weekend, Pirelli have elected to bring the C1, C3s, and C4 tires. So there's a skip there. They skipped the C2s for the mediums. So it's something that I've been saying for a while. Not an original idea. I won't steal it, but I heard it somewhere. And I definitely agree that it can make things very interesting if they skipped a tire allocation. So they did this week, which I don't know how much, it was smart to do it this week, because it was supposed to rain the whole weekend, which it didn't, but, they expected to just do it on inters the entire time, so this wouldn't be very useful. But I do appreciate the effort. I hope they do it for more Grand Prix, and I hope it like actually makes a difference. Like they did an attempt to make the race a 2-stop, like soft, medium, medium, or whatever order they want it to be. I more thought of it as a 1-stop with a hard and medium, with just having a crazy difference between the hard and the medium. So whoever was on the medium was way faster than those on the hards, because in regular races that would be a hard versus soft. So that would have been a cool play like that. Neither happened because it rained, but it did make something maybe interesting, kind of. Anyways, hope they bring it again and try it again in somewhere where it doesn't rain, so it actually works and we can see how it actually affects the race. A bunch of teams brought upgrades for this weekend. Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull with a bunch of upgrades, Aston Martin as well, and Williams and RB. McLaren also brought upgrades, but not like performance upgrades, circuit-specific upgrades, which also all of the teams that I mentioned also brought circuit-specific upgrades. So that is pretty brave for that many teams to bring performance upgrades, just because it's a sprint weekend, you only have one practice session to figure stuff out. So yeah, I guess that was just interesting. And let's just skip right to the sprint, the sprint quali. Oscar gets pole by a pretty big margin. I think it was 5/10 over Max. So Max is P2, Lando is P3, Charles is P4, Esteban Ocon is P5, Carlos P6, Ollie Berman P7, Pierre Gasly P8, Isaac Hadjar P9, and Gabriel Bortoleto closing the top 10 in the sprint qualifying. So that is 8 teams in the top 10, McLaren and Haas being the only teams with both drivers in SQ3, which McLaren are pretty much a given, although they did give me a big heart attack in SQ2. It was very close for both of them to go out. Lando was in the drop zone already, but then he did another lap and improved to P1. But Oscar was really left on the cusp there, so that was a bit of a heart attack there. And then in the sprint, Max gets Oscar into turn 5 on lap 1, which is pretty inevitable. Spa is one of the worst tracks to have pole position just because the slipstream up until turn 5 is huge. So being in P2 is actually your best choice. And it didn't help that Max had a lower downforce setup of that Red Bull. So he just flew by him, and then Oscar couldn't get him back, even with DRS, because the DRS isn't that effective here, but also Max has lower downforce, so it's basically both of them have DRS. So that's what Red Bull tried to do in Silverstone as well, but it actually worked this time because it didn't rain. Although, as I said, it was supposed to rain the entire weekend, so not quite sure what happened there with the rain. But anyways, that was pretty much it for the sprint. Nothing after that really happened. Charles also got Lando in that first lap, turn 5, just like Max got Oscar, but then Lando overtook him back. And from then on, again, like Oscar, couldn't really do anything, and that's how it stayed. So Max won, Oscar P2, Lando P3, Charles P4, Esteban P5, Carlos P6, Ollie P7, and Isaac Hadjar in P8, closing the point positions. And Pierre, who actually qualified P8, so he had a good chance of points, DNS'd and DNF'd in that sprint, which is very impressive, to be honest. He had an oil leak in the beginning, so he didn't start the race. And then after a few laps, they figured something out, sent him out, and then retired the car. So DNS and DNF, crazy work from Pierre and Alpine there. I saw a comment that said that everyone had a sprint and Pierre had a free practice too. So that was pretty funny. But that is pretty much it for the sprint. And then in race quali, Lando gets pole, Oscar gets P2, Charles P3, Max P4, Alex P5, very impressive from Alex, George P6 with 2 purple sections. That is crazy. That just goes to show how tight it is, and also how great everyone's laps were ahead of him, especially Lando's middle sector. It was insane. And then Yuki in P7, Also great from him. As I said, already feeling better with Lauren Mackey as team principal, and then Isaac Hadjar and Liam Lawson P8 and P9, and Gabriel Bortoleto again in P10. And then the race itself, pretty boring if you ask me, even with all the variables that were promising a very exciting race. Like the track itself is pretty exciting, and the weather that was supposed to be pretty exciting. I mean, it rained, but arguably it made it more boring. And also the tire compound jump, that didn't really come into play because it rained. So the track was very wet, visibility was very poor. And after a long red flag and a few laps behind the safety car, we had a rolling start where Lando lost the lead to Oscar into turn 5. Again, same as like Oscar had in the sprint. The slipstream was massive. Oscar lifted a bit less than Lando into a rouge. And also Lando had like a battery issue that he couldn't deploy it well. So Oscar just flew by. And that was most of it. Other than that, we also had Lewis climbing up the order. He started from the pit lane after he qualified P18 and was one of the first drivers to put on slicks. And as usual, he got the timing right. So he overtook a bunch of people with just the pace and also undercutting them all the way up to P7. He also got driver of the day, rightfully so. He was pretty much the only one making moves. I mean, there was some moves in the midfield or like in the lower midfield, but I mean, nothing really happened. Between the McLarens, Oscar got preferential treatment, so he pitted first onto slicks, which left Lando an extra lap out. In my opinion, they could have double stacked if Lando just backed off a little bit from Oscar. It was like a second between the two, like a second and a half between Oscar and Lando, but Lando had a like 10-second gap to Charles behind, so he could have dropped a little bit behind to allow a double stack, which would have lost them a lot less time than doing an extra lap. And this lap is very long. So I do believe they could have done better with that boxing situation. And also then when Lando pitted, he had a bad pit stop. So, I mean, of course he does. But actually, not all hope was lost at that point because everyone pitted for mediums and Lando pitted for hards, which at the time was like, what the fuck are you doing? But it actually had potential because the hards are obviously more durable than the mediums, especially with this tire allocation jump between the C1 and the C3. So they were basically counting on Oscar having to pit again or Oscar degrading his tires a lot more than Lando, and Lando would just catch up to him and it would be easier to overtake him. So it had potential, and I'm honestly very surprised that McLaren even allowed like a different strategy for them, because most of the times they don't. If they compete each other, they give him the same exact strategy. So pleasantly surprised that they gave Lando a chance, and he really was gaining on Oscar a lot and quick, but all the variables didn't actually allow to catch up to him. I think he lost a lot of time on that extra lap and then another second and a half in the pits. And then while he was pushing very hard, he made a few mistakes because he was pushing so hard. So he lost a lot of time. At the end of the race, he was 3 and something seconds behind Oscar. So again, he did close a lot on Oscar because when he came out of the pits, he was like 9 seconds behind him. But it stayed at that 9-second, 8-second gap for a while there, and we didn't start the charge until I think it was maybe too late for Lando to actually catch up. Anyways, it is what it is. Elise tried and gave us something to maybe hope for in this very boring race. So Oscar wins. He's been great at Spa. It's also his favorite track, so I'm very happy that he won it. He drove brilliantly the entire weekend, so props to him. Also, his mom was there, and also his grandfather. He dedicated the champagne to his grandfather. He wrote, I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, you should come to races more often, because like I win when you do. So that's lovely and sweet to see. Then Lando in P2, as I said, which I will take. His worst track, P2, pole position, and P3 in the sprint. I'll take it. But then we have Charles Leclerc in P3, managed to hold Max up for pretty much the entire race. So Max is in P4. George in P5, he managed to get Alex, who finished P6. He managed to defend from Lewis, who finished P7. And then we have Liam in P8, Gabriel Bortoleto with more points for Sauber in 9, and Pierre Gasly in P10. Yuki, who did start in the top 10, pitted too late and couldn't recover from that. I think that was the same for Isaac as well, who unfortunately finished last, a lap down. So it really not work out for him this weekend. And I do gotta mention Colapinto again. He once again finished P19, no points for Alpine. I think he also got out in Q1. Spa was his 7th race, so he's overdue his 5-race contract. And again, nothing against him. I just think it's super unfair towards Jack. And I just would really like to see him back in that seat. Again, not because I don't like Franco, just because I think Jack deserves an opportunity. So yeah, I don't really know what's going on in Alpine right now, like with that seat. I think I said it before, they're looking into Valtteri as well. And obviously they have more reserve drivers to choose from, like Paul Aaron, and I think there are more. So there's a bunch of options for that second seat in Alpine. I'm really unsure with what's going to happen with it for the rest of the year. I don't know if they're ever going to replace Franco mid-year, or like do that mid-year change again. And I certainly don't know what's going to happen with it next year. So I guess we'll just wait and see. And yeah, that's pretty much it, unfortunately. Spa was really built up to be this exciting race, and it ended up being 2 very boring races. So, yeah, next week is Hungary, a bit of a post-traumatic track for McLaren fans. Obviously Oscar's first win, but also the terrible situation they put Lando and Oscar in. So I'm just gonna try to forget that and just remember it as Oscar's first race. Anyway, we have that next week, and then the actual summer break, which is crazy because we literally just had a summer break, but we're just gonna have to deal with another. And we'll talk more about the break itself in next week's video. But until then, enjoy these memes. Bye!